Hello, everyone. Welcome back to my show. I hope everyone's well. It's Thursday. I've got a cup of tea somewhere. It's over here. And it's lunchtime, and Socks is asleep after another very active night from Socks. While the weather's good, he tends to be very nocturnal, and I get the flack from that. He comes and jumps all over the bed and wakes me up, and then sleeps on my lap all day long. Anyway, today I thought I'd talk about series. I've been thinking a lot about book series, those that I've loved and semi-collected. I don't think I've read anything to the end, I don't think. I've always left gaps, which is probably just as well. Anyway, I've been thinking about it because yesterday I sat down and picked out Redwall again for the first time. It turns out, since 2008, Brian Jakes' series about mice and rats and badgers, I think there was 22 volumes over about 20 odd years. I never read them at the time. They came out at the right time for me. It's exactly my generation, in a way, in that I was mid-teens when the first one came out in 86. Maybe if it had been a bit sooner, I would have read them, but I missed out on it, which makes me feel sad. I know of people who were given each new book in hardback at Christmas. It's so exactly my kind of thing. I love books about animals, about warring animals, all going back to Watership Down, of course. I read this for myself years afterwards in 2008, when it was the 20th anniversary or so. That was the edition I got. And looking back at my kind of reading diary, I didn't like it as much as I thought I would. I found it, I think, sentimental and confusing and too long. That was my impression then. But we change, and our reading desires and reading habits change. And sitting down with the first 100 pages of this last night and this morning, I've been completely enthralled. There's a scene with this terrible rat called the Shadow, who's half rat, half weasel, like a shadow without a body to cast a shadow. And he shimmies his way into Redwall Abbey, clinging to the crevices between the bricks. He's sent by Clooney, the Scourge, this terrible rat who wants to take the abbey away from the mice. And the Shadow gets inside, and he's going to steal a portion of this old tapestry that shows Martin the Warrior, the great legendary hero that the mice still revere. And our hero in this book, Matthias, wakes up and comes to the defense of this figure on the tapestry that speaks to him in his dreams and tells him that he's going to be a legend as well. And there's a fight, and the Shadow comes a cropper, and Clooney shows his real evil. And our heroes are knocked back. And that's the point I've got to about a third of the way through this book. And all of it's just riveting. It's like all the best bits of The Wind in the Willows and Watership Down. And the Duncton books, The Moles, which I think I only read one of. So it's led to me looking at the other books and seeing what's next, and to see how affordable they are, see how available they are. And they're all in print, but they've got these kind of slightly grown-up covers in the UK, which are a bit dull. There was this vogue, wasn't there, for putting adultish covers on what are essentially kids' books in the early 2000s, out of some kind of weird shame in reading children's books. The covers I love on these are the American ones, which are unabashed in presenting animals in armour fighting each other with swords in these countryside settings that make the northwest of England look very exotic. I guess it's the northwest. Looking at the maps and knowing that Brian Jakes was a Liverpudlian, it looks like the northwest, a kind of medieval northwest overrun by warlike animals where they live. So I'm going to carry on with this, breaking off from my book bag reading and breaking off from reading the Carson McCullers stories that I'm in the middle of. But that's the point. All of these things are triggers to further reading. That's the idea. Actually, Kate DiCamillo that I read the other day resulted in me buying other books by her from eBay. Ferris, which is her new book, and Because of Winn-Dixie, which is one of her first. I was trying to explain to Jeremy about how, yes, they're kids' books with lovely, big, spaced out text, but they're fabular as well. They're often about animals or toys, but like Hans Christian Andersen or Paul Gallico, the stories are more than just children's stories. That's not to put down children's fiction. It's to suggest that they become, I don't know, universal or applicable for everyone. And I think she has that feeling about her work. So I invested in more of hers. These cost about £3 on eBay, even the hardback of the most recent one. So I don't think she's very sought after in this country, which seems a real shame. I was going to talk about other series because in recent weeks, not with any great effort, but I've been piecing together different collections of things that go together. Usually, as you know, things are pretty randomized on my shelves. The only way I sort things out are into books I've read and books I haven't read, and books I'd quite like to reread sometime. But these major shelves the tidiest shelves in my study, have lots of series that are starting to kind of coalesce. As you remember, you won't remember, why would you? I found a copy of The Queen of Sorcery, David Eddings, recently, which completes my set of the Belgariad. Again, I bought these when I was 15 or 16, in this edition, and just loved them. I love the covers, I love the soapiness. It's a series that makes me think, as it did then, that it's Lord of the Rings meets Knots Landing. This was the one that I found again. It was my favourite, Queen of Sorcery. I do have an American edition, but it's not as nice, really. Anyway, so I've collected this up. My original set was lent to someone who gave them away, which beggars belief, really. I was such a proud lender. Look at this. I love this series. You will love it too. Don't, whatever you do, give it away. But they did. And now I have them again. To read again, I don't know when. It'd be nice just to spend, I don't know, a week at some point just reading nothing but them. The original read that I did back in '86 took about a week. I was so excited. I'm standing too close to the camera. And then this series, these have been split up around the place for a while. I don't know if anybody knows these. Yasmin Gailnorn. This is about 2006-7. No, 2003. It was in 2007 that I read them. Ghost of a Chance is the first one. It's a cozy mystery series, the Chintz and China mystery series. It begins as a kind of shop-based cozy series, and then it gets more and more supernatural by the end. I'll tell you what it says on the back. Emerald O'Brien, single mother of two, is the owner of Chintz and China Tea Room, where guests are served the perfect blend of tea and tarot reading. She never set out to be a detective, but once word gets out that she can communicate with the dead, there's no turning back. So this is a ghosty one. There at the foot of Emerald's bed, a pen hovered above a piece of paper and scrawled these alarming words. I was murdered by my husband, but nobody knows. Help me. True, Emerald was considered the town witch, but she owned a tea shop, not a detective agency. What did the spirit expect? It's so it's quite basic. It's not the right word, but it's vanilla-ish. And then soon the whole series goes bonkers. The second one, Legend of the Jade Dragon, which was harder to get, and I got long after the others, I think. These Barclay Prime Crime books aren't kind of really in shops in the UK. We don't get them in these kind of editions. You have to wait for somebody in the UK to redo, to do their own versions, and these have never come out over here. They usually do them with very boring covers that look like kind of Richard Osman books or something. And of course, the Prime Crime ones have these beautifully painted, literal covers. You know, here's a jade dragon and here's a cat. This one gets a bit stranger. Delicious blends of tea aren't the only draw at the Chinson China Tea Room. Emerald O'Brien, owner and medium, offers her customers a tarot reading. But Emerald, a single mother of two, never saw herself as a sleuth, which proves that even seers make mistakes. Tarot cards never lie, so when they predict chaos and bad luck for the last client of the day, blah, blah, blah. Yeah, it gets into a trail of heartache all the way back to China's Ming dynasty and its ancient mysteries. Did I say Ming mystery or Ming dynasty? And its ancient mysteries. She starts tapping into legends and myths, and it just gets better and better. The next one's a Native American one, I think. Murder Under a Mystic Moon, and it might have been the first one I read. There's something else wandering the forest, something that resembles the Clackatat monster of legend, but maybe a monster of more humankind. And Harvest of Bones. Look at that. This one is cats, I think. Anyway, it becomes straighter by the end. She gets married, and it's called One Hex of a Wedding, and she's quite keen to finish the series off. Now, this is a series I've finished reading from beginning to end, and she sews it all up, much to the dismay of her fans, I think. April 2009, I read this. And then she started getting into much more hell for leather, urban fantasy with kick-ass heroines fighting werewolves, shapeshifters, all those things in city settings. Clearly what she wanted to do the whole time, and had to do these cozies first in order to get there. Very interesting, turning one genre into another as you go along, as your taste changes, or as you discover what kind of book you want to write. Here's the original copies of The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. Again, I had them back in the day and read them as they came out. From being about 10 years old, I would think. Maybe younger. 9 or 10. And then the covers are so nostalgic. And of course, these aren't the same anymore as they used to be. I think they should preserve these things and keep them as they are. I think they're classics. And then Mostly Harmless, which was a little while later, wasn't it? What year was this? 92. It seemed like a long time. It wasn't. So that was them. And, well, I'll not go through them all, but there's a whole load of Star Treks, which is kind of boiled down to, in my mind, the James Blish original show, the Star Trek logs based on the cartoons, Alan Dean Foster. And these are a kind of real ragbag of covers and different editions. These 1980s Chris Achillios ones are the dog's bollocks. Again, I was 14 when I was collecting these and buying them in our town centre for, I think, £1.50 each. I think that's an original. Couldn't believe them. I read them in hardback from the library. Look at these. Some of them are the older ones, which are not quite so exciting. These really aren't so exciting. The ones with just numbers on. 5 is missing because it's on my pile of things I've read this year, because I went back and read it. But aren't they marvellous? I do need to collect up the ones I haven't got with the good covers on. I love these though as well, these, whenever these were, late 70s, the American ones. And the James Blish one, sorry, the Alan Dean Foster cartoon ones, and then the 70s original Star Trek books, which I've got most of, I think. Still some missing. And then movies, and then in the 80s, these original novels that it's very much a, there's lots of them. And so I never read the whole lot, of course. But it's very much kind of find your own adventure. Which are the ones that will stick with you? Some of them really don't. Some of the more militaristic guns and monsters, as Russell T Davies once described some of the Doctor Who books to me, the ones that are just planets, guns and monsters. And like him, I have no interest in stories that are just like that. The ones that have a bit more of an emotional pull. Often the ones that dwell more on the backstories or hidden bits of life for the crew members, like Yesterday's Sun by A.C. Crispin, who I always go on about as a fantastic series tie-in writer. And this is one about Spock's forgotten son who comes back to haunt him. That was a terrific book. And I read this. I read it again in 2013, but I read it for the first time in about 1989, I think. Yeah. Star Trek, and then a whole load of new adventures for Doctor Who. There's my John Wyndham's, mostly with the covers from the 1980s in Penguin, which are these wonderful painted covers. There's Dune over there, and there's the 8th Doctor novels from the BBC books, the series that I wrote for. And over here, there's a whole bunch of targets. Not all of them. I'm not a completist. They're mixed up here, actually. I'm not a completist by any means, as you probably know by now. And not all of them mean everything to me. But the targets from the 1970s, which are mostly based on 3rd Doctor stories and 4th Doctor stories, those are the ones where the real heart of that series is, I think. Some James Herberts, some Guy N. Smiths, Laura Ingalls Wilder, and Mary Poppins. That shelf is amazing. Down here there's a bunch of Paddingtons in hardback. Not all of them. I've got multiple copies of Paddington all over the house. Too many. And the hardbacks are, they're really special, I think. Of course, multiple copies of Narnia around the house. And Laura Ingalls Wilder again. Nicholas and the Gang, this French series of kids' books. I must have talked about these before. It's interesting, they're right next to Lemony Snicket and the series of unfortunate events, which is a good place for them. I'll not get them out. They'll fall out if I pull on that. That's the hardbacks. Jeremy got me that series a couple of years ago on my birthday. Another series I really like, and I haven't quite read to the end yet. But this one, this is a beautiful edition of these. They used to be in a paperback, that's how I read them. But then Thames and Hudson did these, presumably because of the artwork by Senpei, which needed space on its own to spread out. That's what a hardback does for kids' books. I guess that's why the Paddington hardbacks are so valuable to me, because you get to see Peggy Fortnam's drawings on the page as they should be and not just crammed into a paperback. Ditto with actually this edition of Laura Ingalls Wilder and the drawings by, I forget his name. Oh, it doesn't say here. Anyway, you can see his drawings a bit better than you can in the Puffins. Nicholas and the Gang is, what is it, 5? I might be missing one. It's a series in which hordes of French school children in the 1950s, but it could be any time, cause havoc at school and at the seaside and anywhere they go together. And you get to know everybody's characters, you get to know what the teachers are like, you get to know the ways in which people are having these kind of quiet breakdowns around these really badly behaved children. Of course, they're not that badly behaved. They just carry on doing the things that we all remember happening at school. I read these when I was at school, when it was all happening around me. And lots of my friends did as well. We passed these around. There must have been a Scholastic edition or something that came around in book club. And we knew at the time we were living in this kind of chaos. And it's very nostalgic now to remember that kind of joyous, boisterous anarchy of being a kid at school. And then down here, there's collections of short story books. These are very precious to me now. At the time, all I had was this, the Armada Book of Monsters, Book 3, edited by Ronald Chetwynd Hayes. And this came from one of those spinning racks of paperbacks, usually cheap paperbacks. This was, the edition I had was about 30p, I think. Armada books, 40p, were very cheap and pulpy compared with, Puffin books or Piccolo books. Armada always seemed a bit like the poor relation. And the Dandy Cart was a shop near us. I think the pub next to it was called the Dandy Cart. The shop next to it had no name. It was just a convenience store, supermarket, that always smelled slightly because the fridges weren't warm enough. And there'd be this smell of slightly rank cheese and ham and curling lino. And the whole place was slightly dim in the daylight. And it was the closest shop to us on our estate when I was about 10. You have to walk through the underpass, go past this quite rough pub called the Dandy Cart, onto an estate where it was known that people were mostly from the south. They came from down south, so it was a bit rougher. That was the understanding. And we'd go there, and the great thing about it was it would have American comics, DC, Marvel, even Charlton comics, which gradually phased out as the 70s went by. But it had these spinning racks of books. And that's where I remember getting this particular anthology of monster stories. And this cover's always haunted me, this red dragon on the front. There's a beautiful story in this called The Gargoyle by Roger Mallison. I did some research in recent years and found out that Roger Mallison is a pen name for two women, both of whom write stories separately and together in these books. I think Pamela Cleaver is one of them. I forget the other. Anyway, they work together on this gargoyle story about two girls on a school trip to a church who somehow bring a gargoyle back home with them. And it's one of those classic, ordinary kids have some kind of monster they've got to hide from the adults. A genre, I suppose, that goes back to Edith Nesbit and Five Children and It and those kinds of stories, or the Samiad, or the Phoenix. That's the other one, isn't it, that she wrote about. Anyway, in later years, well, as soon as, eBay became a thing, and you could get at these corners of nostalgia as kind of like the last bits of crisps in the bottom of the packet, or the salt, the flavoured salt in the corner of the crisp packet. You could ferret it out and get the things that weren't turning up anymore in charity shops or jumble sales. I managed to find the rest of this series. It's the first Armada monster book. If I've gone through these before, you must tell me if I'm boring you with showing the same old things. The second one. These are all Ronald Chetwynd Hayes, who was a fantastic short story writer himself, and the hero of one of those portmanteau horror movies. I forget which one, somebody will tell me, where they adapt 4 or 5 of his stories, and he's the person led into the story by, I think, Vincent Price. 3, 4. They look a bit tatty, and of course, if they went to a charity shop, they'd be binned and recycled by the people in charge. That's what happens now. So it feels extra special to rescue these things, because these stories have never been reprinted, as far as I know, mostly anyway. And so they feel a bit special and rare. There was somebody called Terry Tapp who'd always write stories about monsters. Obviously about monsters, the monster book, but his would be the title of the story. They'd be called things like Sludge or the Bean Rock Monster, Mudadora, the Slippity Slop. See, it sounds quite juvenile, really. I suppose they are, but there was often very kind of creepy moments in these. Similar series that I never had at the time but knew about. The Sci-fi series, edited by Richard Davies. And 2, that's the best cover. The kinds of things you would dream about, have nightmares about. 3 and 4. I should stop there. I'm going to run out of time, or run over time, rather. The rest of this shelf are bits of other series, like the Pan Books of Horror, Frighteners, Nova, edited by Harry Harrison, Other Edens, the Fontana Book of Horror Stories, and what else? Armada Book of Ghosts, Armada again. This is one of the best anthologies, and I must have raved about this in recent years. Constellations, Stories of the Future, edited by Malcolm Edwards. Every single one in this, apart from one, there was one letdown that I didn't think was very good. But, as I said, it's sometimes only ages afterwards, and you pick up the book again and read the thing that didn't chime at the time, and suddenly it comes to life for you. So how can you ever get rid of any books when you know they could come back to life for you at any moment? Behind this shelf, because of course these have all been double stacked, behind here is the Hardy Boys and the 3 investigators. I've got, of course, not all of them, but a large collection of both. Right, I'm going. It's almost half an hour. I will see you again soon, and I'm sure there'll be more series to talk about. I'll have forgotten things I should have mentioned. Let me know what series you collect, what series you return to. And the funny thing is, it can be years and years after you started them. There are book series that I began reading when I was about 10 that I'm still involved with. Books that series that I've held off finishing. Leaving out volumes because I know I'll want to go back. Which is funny. Okay, goodbye.